Photography is a really interesting business to be in nowadays. It's changed a great deal, like a lot of things. I think in the digital age, it may be one of the endeavors or professions that's really changed over the past maybe 10 years. When I started, probably when I was in school in the 80s, I probably started working mid-80s or early 80s. We were using film. It was much more difficult to go out and shoot a great picture for somebody. You had to understand your equipment, your light, your materials. Pretty much you had to nail things right on the head to come up with a successful photo. Nowadays, with the digital age, it's changed greatly because, first of all, the equipment is very expensive, and the computer equipment that goes along with the camera equipment is very expensive. A lot of people can just take a nice camera and put it on automatic or program and stand a pretty darn good chance of getting a decent picture. Which obviously competes with the people who have had the training and so on and so forth. Also, as we get the proliferation of the internet, you have all these free sources for film, free sources for photography. You can look at magazines for free online, which means that a lot of the traditional magazines have been folding right and left because they can't afford to stay in business. That may be changing. As of yesterday, the New York Times started charging $25 or $35 a month to look at that online, which means if other people do it, then they'll start having some money to spend on writers and photographers. And as we get inundated by cable television and, again, the internet, there's such a huge amount of photographs out there to look at that, in my opinion, there's actually kind of a dumbing down of the buyer's market, the people who look at pictures. I think a lot of people can't tell the difference between a good picture and a great picture and an acceptable picture. I've always been kind of an eclectic person. I'm interested in a lot of things. In 1989, I was on an assignment for a newspaper in Sacramento, California, Sacramento Bee, which is really great. It's one of the great photo papers. And I went to a ranch and I photographed Pacific Bell, who at that time was the Skoll's three-time bucking bull of the year. And I was fascinated by this ranch we went to, which is on the California-Nevada border. And long story short, I really wanted to photograph it just as kind of a personal project. So I started spending lots of time in northern Nevada and photographing cow camps and ranch life, which turned into, I thought I was going to do it for a little while, turned into kind of a whole art career. I got published, art galleries wanted my work, and so I'm selling work in art galleries. If you ever did the math in terms of, I mean, that's probably one of the things I'm best known for. If you ever did the math in terms of the artwork, you'd probably figure out that you're making $1 an hour or something. I don't know. I've never wanted to do the math because it would be too sobering. But sometimes the publicity that you get from that ends up turning into a commercial assignment, or your name being familiar to people. It's really hard to track where that stuff goes. In terms of career, I'm not going to talk too long, but in terms of career, what I was thinking about telling you guys was that I think you really have to kind of look around and see what you could offer that would maybe set you apart from other photographers, or maybe something that would that you'd be able to do. I mean, I do so many different things. I don't have to depend on one source of income. I can make little money doing art. I can make little money doing magazine work. I can make little money doing corporate work. One of the things I've thought of during the past few years is in terms of shooting portraits, whether human or equine, you know, nowadays somebody it used to be somebody would want a picture of an oil well. They'd have to send someone out to shoot it, or they could go online and they could type in oil well, and they'd have a choice of like 1 billion pictures that they could get for really cheap, because that market has changed too. The interesting thing about people and horses, animals, is that we change. It's not like, you know, I can't buy a stock photo of you. And 3 years from now, even if I could, you know, you're going to look different. And so it's kind of a nice thing, because that area of kind of portraiture, again, people or animals, is something that's going to constantly change. And so it's not something you can just whip up in Photoshop or buy stock photos. So that's one of the things I've been thinking about a lot. Another thing is, when you look at the advertising, photography, corporate photography, news photography, a lot of these people are at the top of their game. It's very competitive. You tend to have to live near a big city. I mean, I got my start I lived in Los Angeles for a while, and I would go to New York and Washington, D.C. twice a year and show my portfolio. When you're young, it seems very exciting. If you decide you want to hang with your family and have kids and have a community, it changes things, because you don't want to be on the road all the time. And so again, there's that, for me, there's that kind of local view of what you could be doing with your work, where you wouldn't have to be on the road constantly. There's a fabulous school, Northwest College, over the mountain here, that has a great photo program. I think it's a 2-year program, and people come out doing Photoshop and portraiture. It's kind of grooming people to probably do portraiture and wedding stuff, and, you know, kind of more maybe down-to-earth kinds of photography. When I went to school, they gave us the impression, I went to one of the best photo schools, that when we graduated, we were going to be shooting beautiful models on top of taxi cabs in Times Square in New York. And, I mean, it's a bunch of bull. It doesn't work. Whereas the people in Powell kind of, I think they're much more realistic. It's a really hard profession. I don't know what's going to happen to it. It's changing radically. I often think of the motion picture industry when movies were silent movies, and all of a sudden one day they came up with the talkies, where they actually recorded sound, and all of a sudden tons of people lost their jobs, because maybe they were, you know, great physical actors, but maybe their voice sounded like Donald Duck or something, and they were just like, you know, out of there. So things in industries change, and I think the trick is you have to be flexible. You can't be a stick in the mud. You can't say, this is it, this is what I like, this is traditional, this is what my grandfather did, this is what my father did, so this is what I'm going to do, because time changes, things change, and we have to kind of morph along with it. So a lot of, you know, not so good news in a lot of ways. On the other hand, Personally, it's been a fabulous adventure. I've got to do a lot of really great things, along with a lot of really boring things, but the great things more than make up for the boring things. The reason I ended up in Sheridan, I live in Story, was because I was on the road, having left California, wasn't sure what I was going to do, happened upon the Padlock Ranch. I was curious about taking pictures. It turns out it was the 50th anniversary of Padlock Ranch. They wanted to do a coffee table book, which never happened, but I did negotiate, kept the copyright to the pictures, and went all over the place in the Padlock in Wyoming, Montana for a little over a year. Not every day, but, and I fell in love with this part of the country. And so I really like being here. I still travel. I don't do a whole lot of local or regional or state work even, but you just never know where life's going to take you. So I'm just going to go ahead and show you some work. I'm gonna show you like a presentation of my artwork, and then if we have time, I'll show you a few odds and ends that I've shot for magazines or other stuff, and then if you have any questions, I'll answer those.